Hello, welcome to the first interview series of the Tiger Minor League Report series for 2025. And we are very happy to have the president of baseball operations, Scott Harris. And Scott, thanks for coming on. And before we get to the questions, we always ask our first time guests this question. Chris, take it away.
Hi, Scott. Happy New Year, if it's not too late to say that. We always want to hear about our guests' earliest baseball memory and kind of curious if there's something that sticks out for you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on. You guys do awesome work. I follow a lot of your stuff and just really appreciate all the hard work it takes to put together the minor league report.
Thank you.
My earliest baseball memory, it's kind of a collection of memories. My dad used to take my brother and me to Candlestick Park in San Francisco for the Cubs-Giants series every year, in addition to other Giants games. But my dad grew up a Cubs fan. My mom grew up a Giants fan. And I vividly remember sitting in some pretty cheap seats at Candlestick, staring at that old scoreboard in left center field, at the foghorn in center field. That's probably my earliest memory. There's a story that's going in my family about how there was like an inside the park home run or grand slam or something like that when my mom was out getting nachos and she like completely missed it. I don't think that's a memory that I actually remember, but you know how like you get told these stories so many times that you think you remember them. So like that's somewhere out there. I don't think I actually remember it, but we had a lot of really fun times at Candlestick growing up.
I'll do anything for nachos as well. I mean, was it as windy as they always said it was?
It was freezing. Oh my goodness! And the wind would swirl, and so those old videos of those pop-ups that just take on a life of their own, like that was accurate. We saw a bunch of those.
Yeah, and Raj and I are both kind of children of the '80s and early '90s, I guess. But I'm curious if you had a favorite baseball player from when you were growing up.
I think my favorite baseball player was probably Sammy Sosa. I was in middle school. I think middle school and during the home run chase, and I remember always just kind of running to the library to check the box score. And I remember being fooled a bunch of times. You know how sometimes it'd be like 1 for 4 with a hit, a run, an RBI.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he probably homered, and then it was actually like a double, and then he ended up scoring. You're like, oh man,
Yeah.
But I just remember how fun that summer was, just like kind of chasing the home run chase between him and McGuire. And they just brought such big personalities to the game. It was just kind of like a must-see summer. And I think I really grew to love Sammy that summer. So that's probably my favorite player growing up.
That's funny. There's a whole section in my I was a senior in high school in our yearbook about the home run chase. Like it had nothing to do with our class, but it was such big news. And I remember I've told the story in the podcast before. I went to the game at Tiger Stadium where Sammy Sosa broke the record for most home runs in a month. It was also
in June, right?
Yeah, it was Matt Anderson's major league debut. When the Tigers took the reliever first overall.
Yeah.
But it was a very memorable experience for me, and that's all we were doing in these games is making memories, right?
Right.
So yeah. Well, that's those are fun stories. Yeah, I've always loved the power speed guys, and I guess Sosa he stole a little bit when he was younger, right? I don't remember.
Yeah, he also hit 300 at least one. I think he had like 308 one year or something like that. I don't think people really appreciated his hit tool enough back then. It was obviously a different game and everything, and the power overshadowed all the other aspects of his game. But he was a pretty dynamic player, and he used to be pretty fast too. Could steal a few bags, and it's just really fun to watch.
Yeah. So let's start with kind of like the draft philosophy and strategy, because you talk about the back then 5-tool players were such a thing. Like everybody talked about Sammy Sosa fit that description of a 5-tool player. How do you balance drafting for organizational needs versus taking the best player available?
Yeah, we don't draft for organizational need. We just don't. I mean, in other sports, it makes sense for someone in my position to draft for organizational need. If you're drafting your starting point guard or your starting quarterback or something like that, and these guys are going straight from the draft to the highest level, it makes sense. For us, I mean, these guys are the high school kids will barely play in their first summer. The college kids will be exhausted playing in their first summer. They're several years away from actually impacting us at this level. So we draft the best talent available, and we try to maximize the talent that we can get out of our given pool every year.
Just a side question there. You mentioned that the high school kids will barely play. Where do you stand on? They moved the complex league season up like a whole month. So the high school kids who got drafted this year could barely, like, they may have been able to squeak into a playoff game, and then you have to do the bridge league stuff. Does that affect you at all, or is the bridge league enough for you to get a grip on where these guys can go next year?
Yeah, it's really tough. It's we've dealt the high school kids out of the draft like a pretty tough hand. A lot of them finish their seasons in May, and then they take a couple months off, and then they get drafted, and then they ramp back up. And we often see like soft tissue injuries when they ramp back up, and then we used to have a league for them to play in, and now it's the bridge league. It's a blessing and a curse. It's a curse because they don't get as many reps as you would want in your first summer. It's a blessing because you can ramp them up in a more consistent, like systematic way. You can, introduce them to an organization rather slowly and do some targeted work with position coaches on specific areas of weakness that you think are going to get exposed in pro ball. Left to my own devices, I'd rather have them get the reps in the summer, but I can't really control that. But the Bridge League has been a nice adjustment that Ryan Garco and Peter Bransfield and them have worked really hard to create for us.
We were sneaking around YouTube finding random bootleg Bridge League feeds. I think I got one. I was looking for hey, is Bryce Rayner out there? And I don't think he ever did play, but I was like, I thought there was is that Bryce Rayner? And I think it was Jude Warwick that was out there playing. Yep. Well, I kind of like him. I don't know. It's one of those hunch feels I have just from, I dug up a bunch of high school footage of him. I think playing against, is it David Sloan? Another kid who was in the second round.
Ethan Sloan,
is that right? Yeah. I know David Sloan. David Sloan's a tight end for the Lions, wasn't he?
Yeah.
All right. But doing well, and I don't know. I caught a couple hits. I think he had a couple nice knocks. I'm like, I kind of like this kid. Not to get too much into specifics from last year's draft, but that was one of the things we've noticed in the last couple of years. As in years past, the Tigers would draft a high schooler, but almost exclusively in the first 3 rounds or something, like one of the big bonus guys. And I've noticed now that you guys are landing high schoolers later in the draft, that not necessarily for huge bonuses, a little bit more money than you'd expect. But to me, that indicates a lot of great work by the scouts on the ground, talking and finding out if these kids are willing to sign. And so we were just kind of curious where you stand on how important the scouts are to the game. Because, there's a whole big Baseball America article today about, scouts are worried about their position in the game and stuff. And kind of curious where you fall on that scouts and analytics divide.
Yeah. I mean, my opinion is it's a false dilemma. It's not analytics or scouting. It never has been. It shouldn't ever be. We trust our scouts. If our scouts have conviction on a player in any round and they want to make a compelling argument that that player should be the pick, we're going to listen. We should listen. Jude Warwick is a great example, like an undersized high school kid with all the actions, the physical traits, and the ability to invest in his body and potentially become an up the middle player that can help us. Like, we're not good enough as an organization to walk by that and feel like we can go find that somewhere else. Like, we have to look under every stone to try to find value in every part of the draft. And I think, one of our operating principles in this organization since I got here is we don't really care where you came from. You could be a first round pick or you could be a 20th round pick. You could be part of a huge deadline deal, or you could be, Sean Gunther, who was, back in the napkin kind of waiver claim that nobody really thought about. And then all of a sudden he's getting a huge double play ball against Kyle Tucker against Houston to help keep us in that game and set up, Ibanez's double down the left field line that wins a playoff series for the first time in 11 years. We don't really care where you came from. Once you're a Tiger, and we're going to invest in you. And I think, look at our major league team right now. Kerry Carpenter was a 19th round pick, and, he's one of our best hitters right now. Jason Foley was undrafted, and now he's a back end reliever for us. We have to be focused on talent wherever we can get it. And, one of the most important things we can do is continue to, believe in our scouts, give our scouts opportunities to find talent, anywhere in the country, and make sure that we're listening to them when they, uncover a Jude Warwick or, one of these players that isn't necessarily as publicized going into the draft, but can prove to be one of those, talented, undervalued finds that come out of the draft every year.
And how much is an emphasis on in-person evaluations versus video scouting in today's game? Because you look at how much there's video on Twitter, there's video everywhere. And so to me, and this is something we've always talked about, Chris and I, we go to a lot of games for a reason, because you can see something different versus just a 10-second, 20-second clip where it doesn't show the foul, the 6 at pitches where he fouled bats or pitches off, or when the time where he just missed a pitch with a curveball, or whatever the case may be. So how important is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's paramount. We have to be in the ballpark. We have to be seeing players play with our own eyes. I think there are a few nuances here that are worth calling out. One, video's gotten a lot better. For most games, especially in professional baseball, but also amateur baseball, we got a bunch of different angles. We can see different things than we used to be able to. So you can fill in a lot of blanks on video, but you can't fill in all the blanks. I think the second and the most important nuance here is the prevalence of video and data allows our scouts to focus more intently on the things that we can't find via video and data. So, if you rewind 20, 25 years ago, one of the more important jobs the scout had was to have the radar gun behind the dish and record velocity. That's not really necessary anymore. I mean, we have, more accurate velocity readings through data than we would have through a radar gun. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that a scout is, more fungible now. It means that scout can leverage his experience and his evaluation skills to focus on other things instead of, noting the velocity readings of every single pitch. He can stay more focused on the player's actions or their delivery, or, some of the nonverbals that give you an indication of what kind of teammate the player is. A lot of the really important things that you can't really pick up on video, our scouts can focus more intently on now because of the resources that are at our disposal.
Yeah, and we've been enough of these minor league games where we actually get to know the names of these like the Hawkeye or TrackMan guys, and seeing they're back there cataloging every pitch, and then they've got 6-8 cameras all around the park, and I assume all that stuff's getting uploaded wherever, and then you got the manager after the game typing everything and putting it in Caesar or whatever. I'm curious, how quickly does that get to you? And you got a lot of stuff on your plate. Are you staying up late watching minor league games, or like how often can you actually focus on this stuff?
You should ask some other people in the front office to corroborate this. I feel comfortable admitting that I'm a MILB TV junkie. Like, I'm watching every night, multiple screens, texting Gark and Greeny and everyone. If I see something, I love it. I'm absolutely obsessed with watching our minor league players as much as possible, because that's our future. Like, we have chosen the path of development in this organization, and we have to be obsessed with it. Absolutely obsessed with every little nuance, because, the core pieces of the future Tigers teams are currently, Mud Hens and Seawolves and Whitecaps and Flying Tigers. And we got to be hyper-focused on every nuance of their game, because we feel responsible when a player in our organization doesn't reach his potential. It's going to happen a lot in this game, especially with the attrition rate in the minor leagues. But, when a talented young player doesn't reach his potential in our organization, we should be held responsible. It's not entirely our fault. Like, it's always a partnership between us and the player, but we treat it like it's our fault. Gark and Shane Farrell and their staffs are absolutely obsessed with getting the most out of our players, and we should be. And I think that is one of the reasons why we've taken a huge step forward in the last 2 years.
What do you believe are the keys to turning a good minor league player into a consistent major league contributor? Because there's times where we'll get a question about a guy who's, certain shortstop in Toledo who had the league organization in home runs, and he's not getting a call up. And so those are things that we always kind of go, well, the organization knows better than we do. So how does that factor into it? What do you believe in your and how you apply these philosophies?
Yeah, I mean, a few things come to mind. First, adjustability is really important. Second, the ability to help us on both sides of the ball is really important. I mean, you've seen the brand of baseball that we have adopted in Detroit over the past couple of years. It's aggressive. You know, we are running the bases hard. We are playing the game hard defensively. We are not giving in at the plate. AJ is constantly, you know, pressing buttons to pinch hit or bring in a new reliever or whatever. We need to have players that can help us on both sides of the ball, because when AJ makes a move, that player has to not only come through in that spot, but also be able to be a defensive asset for us to help us close out a win. So I think, you know, we focus a lot on helping players that are skilled in one dimension become very well-rounded and make sure that they can help AJ, you know, on both sides of the ball. And then the adjustability component is really important. You know, one of the things that we have done in this organization recently is we've tried to challenge players while they're performing. You know, so if you're performing as, you know, a flying tiger or a whitecap or a sea wolf, and there are elements of your game that we think are going to get exposed at the next level, it's too late to wait for a promotion and then wait for you to struggle before we challenge you to address those things. So have been recent situations in which, you know, we have challenged Jace Young directly, or we've challenged Jackson Jobe directly on elements of their game while they are one of the best players at that level. Like, hey, you're performing really well. Your scoreboard stats are really impressive, but we think this element of your game is going to get exposed in the next level. So we want you to address it now. We want you to conquer that adjustment now, so that when you get to the next level, not only are you ready and you avoid the struggles that will come at the next level, but maybe you stay at that next level for less time. Like, maybe it's a shorter stint in Toledo before you actually get to Detroit. So we're trying to see around the corner. We're trying to be proactive in helping these guys address the areas that may get exposed in their game at future levels, so that they can actually get through the system faster and help us in Detroit even faster. And I think the 2024 season was an indication that it's gone pretty well for us. Like, guys have been able to get to this level and help us a lot sooner than we otherwise would have expected a couple of years ago.
How important is failure in that process of guys figuring things out? And what happens when you challenge a guy and, I don't know, send him to the Arizona Fall League and he wins the Triple Crown? What are you supposed to do there? You know, you challenge him and he goes out and dominates. What's the next step there?
Yeah, let me back up a couple of steps. Obviously, we're talking about Briseño here. I don't really focus on failure per se. I do focus on adversity. You know, how these young guys respond to adversity is really important. And taking Josue Briseño, for example, like he faced a ton of adversity last year. Like, he had the knee injury, and he thought he was going to get a ton of reps throughout the 2024 summer, and he found himself in rehab. And we talk about rehab a lot in this organization as not, you know, a time to just, you know, improve medically. It's a time to improve all aspects of your game, so that when you come back, when you're activated, you're better than you were when you got hurt. And there is no better example than Josue Briseño. The investment that he made in his body last summer to come back and look completely different than he did in spring training is really, really impressive. You know, our strength and conditioning and medical staff did a great job with him. He came back stronger, leaner, but most importantly, he was moving better in the box, which allowed him to win the Triple Crown in the Fall League. And so it's really impressive for me to see a young man, especially given how young he is right now, respond to adversity the way he did last summer, and then be rewarded for how he responded to adversity by winning the Triple Crown in the Fall League. And I will say, just for some context there, I mean, he's basically like a sophomore in college right now, and he just won the Triple Crown in the Arizona Fall League against much older competition. It's really, really impressive, and he deserves all the praise that he got for it.
Yeah, adversity is a better word than failure. I think failure is a little bit strong, but yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I was going to say, I know he worked on his swing mechanics, and it just seems like he's just clearing the ball out faster. And speaking of, so you were talking about looking at players. You looked at one guy that comes to mind too. Look at a player like Gage Workman, who was a switch hitter, left-handed. Now he with strikeout percentage under 30%, gets picked up by the Cubs. those are to me wins, and it just seems like those are the type of, in terms of I guess we've talked to Brant earlier before about learning new pitches, what have you. How is that in terms of like the process of that going? When is it something that when you're looking at the stat line, or it's more than just a stat line, right? Because a lot of times we get those questions about, well, he's hitting X, and X. How does you sit there and go, well, there's a little more to it than just a batting average or how many home runs he's hit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we talk about development a lot. Like you see it in media articles as this one guy had this one idea and brought it to a player, and then it was this big unlock. Sometimes that happens for sure, but more often than not, progress is super messy and it takes a ton of people. So we have an entire development group and performance group that are obsessed with finding little ways for all of these players to get better. And sometimes it's like, you're watching a Seawolves game super late at night and you end up slacking an analyst and a pitching coach of like, hey, has he thought about adding a sinker here? Or like, hey, what if we go to a gyro slider here? Or has he ever tried to split? And that's the first step. And then it ends up in a pitching meeting, and then it ends up in a bullpen, and then it ends up like all of a sudden, again, like Sean Gunther, like pitching completely differently in the playoffs. Like oftentimes these are long, messy processes with a ton of characters in it, a ton of contributors throughout the system. I think Ryan Garco does a really good job of building a department that performs at a level that is greater than the sum of the parts. Like these guys really feed off each other. I think our entire organization, especially, with AJ in the big leagues, like we try to really feed off each other. We try to be in it for the right reasons, and the right reasons is the players. Like we try to prioritize the players over everything and just find ways to help them get better. But sometimes it's just like a slack late at night that ultimately becomes an idea, that becomes a new pitch, that becomes like a new way of attacking hitters. And then all of a sudden this guy's in the big leagues, like really, really helping us. So it's not as glamorous as it seems like in a lot of media articles, but I do think we have a really good culture of staff members and players that are here because they just want to win and they want to do everything they possibly can to win. And we have a lot of people pulling in the right direction. And it's really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, I get the sense that like 95% of business is happening on Slack. Like GM's, trade offers. It's just like an annoying fantasy league, I assume.
Yeah.
No, I mean, Raj touched on engaged workmen. You guys got kind of rated a little bit in the Rule 5, both in the major league and the minor league portion, which is probably another one of those bittersweet things. Like, well, I guess it's a sign that we're doing well with development, but we don't want to necessarily lose these guys. But yeah, I don't know if you had any specific thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew we were going to. Like it's the event that everyone talks about is actually the Rule 5. But a few weeks before, when we set our reserve list, like we're having those conversations. It was like, who do you think is going to get taken? Who can we protect? Like we only have a finite number of spots to protect, and so the guys we lost actually kind of saved other guys, in some way. And as frustrating as it is to work really hard to help a player get better and then see them, perform in another organization, at the end of the day, it is a huge compliment to our staff and our development group because, the 29 other teams have a ton of options. They can choose players from any organization, and they're choosing players from our organization because they believe that players in our organization are more talented than the other ones. And so it is a compliment. We may get some of those players back. The history of the Rule 5 draft suggests that we may get them back, and that's part of the calculation when you're deciding who to protect and who to not protect. But I kind of hope I'm getting this question every single year because it means we have a really talented organization. The most talented organizations always get rated in the Rule 5, and we haven't typically gotten rated in recent years, and we're starting to get rated now, which is an indication that we have a lot of talent here.
Yeah, especially a guy like Jack Anderson, who kind of goes under the radar, does really well the last couple of months, where I think he was starting to really kind of figure things out. And then Boston's like, no, we're going to take him. It's like, damn, like, no, because I just, I'm not saying I'm a Jack Anderson stan or anything, but just to noticing some of the things he was doing towards the end of the season, really stands out. And the last question too for us is, in terms of the international side, I think the Tigers are starting to really make some really significant progress. Last year, seeing kind of Montero from a side of seen since the Felipe Lira days where the Tigers, I mean, this is how far the Tigers have come, where it took them almost 25, 30 years to have a starter, not just a reliever, but a starter, not named Jose Lima or Felipe Lira, go out there and throw a complete game. To me, I think that you talk about how much of the international side, just in terms of the development and guys like Framber, Chris, I never,
Montia.
yeah,
Fred
Montia,
Gerber, Fred
yeah,
Gerber, I
just,
think.
yeah, Fred Gerber just coming out, having a really good complex league, then having a strong postseason. That is a point of pride for you guys that I think that should be bragged about a little more often, at least in my opinion.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, we're proud of the progress we made. We got a whole lot of work to do ahead of us. I think that's going to be an evergreen comment for me, because I just don't think we can ever be satisfied on this. I think we made big strides domestically in the Rule 4 draft, and then we've also made big strides internationally. I think we've changed some of the profiles that we're targeting as an organization, but more than that, I also think like we are drafting and signing players into a development system with clear strategies and goals. I think as I said in my opening press conference, like we are choosing the path of development. We are going to build this organization through development, and I think development is even more important now than it has ever been for a few reasons. I think one, young players are getting the big leagues faster than they ever have. So sometimes like these players aren't quite finished products when they get to the big leagues. So every stop on their journey up to the big leagues is really important, but also like the big league level is a really important finishing school. So we got to stay hyper focused on like, even when a Cater Montero gets to the big leagues, he's not a finished product yet. Like he's putting in a ton of work this offseason to come back better than he ever was. And he threw a complete game last year. So we got to help, continue to get these guys better. A second reason why we're going to continue to invest in this development stuff is because you guys have seen at the big league level, advanced scouting information is ubiquitous. Like every time, like these guys get to the big league, watch Cole Keith, watch, Parker Meadows. Like as soon as they get to the big leagues, these other teams already know their weaknesses and they're exploiting them immediately. So we got to help these guys make adjustments in the minor leagues and be comfortable making adjustments, because we know they're going to have to make adjustments in the big leagues. And then, finally, like we just have to be a destination for development. We have to be one of those organizations that players can, bank on getting better in. I think that's really helped us in free agency with Michael Lorenzen and Jack Flaherty and Alex Cobb and Gleyber Torres and all these players. But it's going to have to help us internationally too. When we get back to international and you have a choice with the same bonus. If we have a reputation as an organization that gets the most out of our pitchers, gets the most out of our hitters, like these talented players they're going to sign with us, and then we're going to get the most out of them developmentally. So while I am very proud of the progress that we have made in 2 years, we got a long way to go, both domestically and internationally. And I'm looking forward to putting in the work to make sure that we can continue to get more talent out of both pipelines.
And yeah, I just had a couple more questions, if that's cool.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we always talk about making adjustments, and you just mentioned it. Like that seems like probably the most important thing you can do as a pro athlete, is because they're going to find your weaknesses and you have to adjust to that, and they're going to look for new weaknesses. And I'm just kind of curious, is when you're targeting players, how do you find out if they have that adaptability? It's something you can watch it a little bit maybe with the college guys or maybe guys in the showcase circuit, but it almost feels like a personality trait.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a fundamental level, the way we evaluate players has to keep adjustability in mind. When we're looking at certain deliveries are more adjustable than others. Certain bat paths are more adjustable than others. Certain types of athletes are more adjustable than others. So I think one of the things that we've done pretty well in the last couple of years is trying to target players that we think are going to be adjustable both physically and mentally when they get into pro ball. I think Rob Metzler and Mark Connor have done a really good job in the draft, and Rob and Tom and Miguel have done a really good job internationally of like, let's get the types of athletes that we can help mold in our development system to be really adjustable, and let's get them really, really comfortable making adjustments before they get to the big leagues and before AJ's asking them to make an adjustment. So I think, in terms of how we evaluate athletes and deliveries and movement patterns, you can find more adjustable traits than others. And then also, how we communicate with our players and preach what is important in this organization is the second layer of it. If you can get adjustable athletes and then you can preach the importance of making adjustments, then hopefully by the time they become, mud hens and then tigers, they're very comfortable making adjustments and they demonstrate that they can do it.
And and the last thing I wanted to mention here was, and again, you touched, I don't know, 10 minutes ago, you talked about how much better development has gotten in the system over the last few years. And we wholeheartely agree with that. Like, we go back 8-10 years in this, and we talk about it all the time. We used to ask guys what they're working on, and they just be like, I don't know, getting better. And one of the big things now is we see the guys a couple of years ago talked about nutrition, but the big thing seems to be individualized player or development plans, which is obvious. It seems obvious to me, but I guess the resources weren't always there. But one of the things, I'm just curious how you marry that, because that's great. You can help guys individually get better, but when everybody has their own coach, everybody's, or they're off the drive line or tread, or we see these videos of Kerry Carpenter, with Teacher Man, or Max Clark and Bryce Renner, they're all out at these different places. How do you make sure that they're not straying from the path when they've got all these different voices? Yeah,
I mean, it's a challenge that's not unique to baseball. It exists in the NBA too. Like every player has their own shooting coach and strength guy and trainer and all of that stuff. I think in this world of hyper specialized sports, it's just becoming more and more common. I think the best way for us to approach it is we gotta hire world-class coaches ourselves, and we got to make sure that they are reaching across the aisle to create connections with an individual's coach back home, because we're not interested in fighting the battle of like, hey, listen to us, not them. Like, it's just that's a losing strategy, because maybe you'll win some of them, maybe you'll lose other ones, but the player is the one that like really suffers there. So we need to develop strong connections with every influence in a player's life and make sure that, we at every turn have the player's best interest in mind, and that we are using all the resources at our disposal in this organization and all of our energy and effort to demonstrate that, hey, we're trying to get the absolute best player out of you as possible. I think we've done a really good job. And I think some of the things that we have noticed is, some players that were like way more focused on their, individual coaches back home have suddenly kind of started to look around and seen a lot of other players get better in this system over the last 2 years, and started to come kind of back towards some of our, coordinators and coaches that are doing really good work with other players. So I think we found a nice medium in which Gark has consistently emphasized with his entire staff that, hey, we got to establish connections with every individual coach back home, but we also got to continue to produce really good content and help get players better when they're under our watch. And I think if we do both of those things, we're going to end up in an environment where the players are the ones winning, not suffering, because the players are being prioritized at both ends, both with the Tigers coaches and with their individual coaches back home, and everyone's preaching the same message.
Yeah, and it shows here with the roster that was built in 2024, where you see guys that were big contributors for Erie's run in 2023 with Hurdler. Madden comes to mind. These guys are, especially a guy like Madden and Herder, but both those guys really were clutch down the stretch, especially when you look at the adaptation of, I always think of Tai Madden as a prime example of great development, where he was struggling against lefties, got to Toledo, was able to focus and then suddenly was shutting down lefties, no problem whatsoever. Because that difference between AA and AAA, and as you mentioned this before, there's such a. I used to think, in my opinion, that AA and AAA was a much subtle difference, but more and more now it seems like there is. And to see guys like Herder and Madden come up, especially part of that championship run, and having that playoff experience, I'm sure played a big part and the run this year. I mean, I know I asked her, they're just joking around saying, "Oh, how does this compare to Erie?" And he just gave me a look like, "Really? Why'd you ask?" Joking around, of course, but it was just, but those winning experiences, I'm sure, really helped those guys out.
Yeah, I mean, Ty's a really good example of a lot of the things I've been talking about in this podcast. If you rewind to spring training 2024, he was coming off a dominant year in Erie in 2023. He came to camp fully expecting to at least go to AAA, if not make the opening day roster with the Tigers. And we had a series of difficult conversations with him in which we told him he's going back to Erie to start the year. But he's going back to Erie with a specific targeted goal, and that was to add a split to give him a new weapon to soften the baseball against lefties, because we identified that he may get a little exposed at the upper levels against talented left-handed hitters. We saw flashes of that in 2023 in AA, and we felt like, hey, if we don't really intervene right now, it may be a difficult year for him in AAA, and he may not actually make the big leagues. And Tai, to his credit, responded very well to adversity. He tackled the challenge head on. He went and dominated AA in April, earned himself a promotion to AAA. And I would argue he doesn't make our postseason roster. He doesn't, pitch meaningful innings for us down the stretch without that intervention in Erie at the beginning of 2024. If we had just promoted him to AAA, he may have, added a split there and figured out. He may not have, but I feel really good about both the process that we used to identify a weakness and challenge the player directly, and then also how the player, Tai in this case, responded to adversity and got a little bit more out of himself. I think it's a good development win for us, and again, like the best part of it is Tai really was the one that benefited the most from it. And I will tell you this, like in my chair, the absolute best decisions I make, the best moments that I have in this job is when you promote a young player. I always try to send an email either from my account or from Jeff Greenberg's when we promote a young player for their major league debut, to all of the staff and the scouts and the analysts and the trainers and the strength guys who touched that player throughout his journey to the big leagues. And I remember when I was sending the email on Tai before his debut, I included a video of his delivery at University of Texas, and it is wildly different than it is right now. Even the slot is different. The pitch mix is different. He obviously didn't have a split back then. He added a cutter. He added some burn on his four seamer. It's a better slider now. He's just a wildly different pitcher, which is a huge credit to not only the pitching coaches that helped him along the way, but also the trainers and the strength guys and everyone that touched him and contributed to this journey, and ultimately the moment when he got to declare that he was a big leaguer, and then also help us become a playoff team for the first time in 10 years. So really proud moment, and just really proud of all the people that touched Tai along the way, and all the hard work that Tai put into himself.
Yeah, awesome. His was one of the more dramatic, like, we immediately like, oh, he's going over his head now, or he's not, his spine isn't tilting anymore. Like there's a lot of stuff there that even we could pick up on that. Like I feel bad that we didn't pick up on Brant Herder's like rocking motion or whatever it was that helped him. Like, we missed on that one, but some of them are a lot more subtle. And I've never been great with identifying like little tweaks in mechanics and batting stances and stuff like that. Roger's better than that, than me. One thing, we can talk to you for 10 hours. You're very busy, and we could ask you about every single player possible. But I do, while we were talking about pitching, one thing I've brought up on Jackson Jobe a number of times when we talk about him is this stuff looks outstanding metrically. It's like off the charts, all this stuff, but the whiff rate has not been there. He doesn't, like, he misses barrels. Seems like he gets a lot of fouls against him, and the stuff seems like it should get more swings and misses. So I don't know if there is a specific plan there, if it's a concern at all, if you could even tell us about it. But it's just something that like, I sometimes I try to, I like almost err on the negative side of players because the major leagues is so hard. I just want to prepare fans for something that might go wrong. And I don't know if this is a concern for you guys at all, or if it's just me, looking for stuff.
I think he's going to be just fine. Yeah,
fair enough.
I also think when he shows up to spring training this year, you're going to see some different things with him. He's been putting in a lot of work on specific adjustments this offseason, and I'm just really excited to see him in camp. Like, he's really talented, And I think he's going to miss plenty of bats.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it always felt like he should. I just didn't, I'm like, well, whatever. But no, that's good. I appreciate that.
Scott, thanks again for your time. I
Yeah.
really appreciate you taking the time during all this. I know with all the stuff you can't talk about with that thing at third base or whatever. That's fine.
Unless there's any big news you want to break, we'll let you go.
But we appreciate the time, and again, we look forward
so
to. It's just congratulations again. Also, this is something that's not talked about to me at least enough. Tigers were the most winningest organization in the minor leagues last year, and I think that's a source of pride that should be humble brag a little more, at least in my opinion.
And making the playoffs for the first time in forever with the youngest team, like this is all stuff that congratulations. You should be proud of that. And I know fans are super excited, but they want more. Fans always want more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I will say, like, I'm the face. I'm the one that gets invited to this podcast, but there's just so much great work that's happening behind the scenes by so many staff members that aren't household names or don't get invited on the podcast or anything like that. Like they're the ones that have really put in all the work to create that. I mean, the way this organization looks and feels right now, compared to 2 years ago when I first showed up is just wildly different. And it's really a testament to all the work that they're doing and all the opportunities they have had to positively impact a player's career. And they've done it and they've run with it. We still gotta, keep doing it. We got to find new ways to help players get better, but there's no way that we are, a playoff team for the first time in 10 years with the youngest team in baseball, won a playoff series for the first time in 11 years, consistently one of the top ranked farm systems and the winningest organization in 2024 without all the coordinators, the managers, the coaches, the development staff, the strength group, the nutritionists. I mean, I can't even name all of them, but it's a huge testament to all the work that they've put in and all the sacrifices they've made to help Tigers minor league players accomplish really, really good things in 2024. And I'm looking forward to what they can do in 2025.